The supermarket hummed with the quiet chaos of late-night shopping, carts squeaking across polished floors, the soft ding of price scanners, and tired cashiers yawning between customers. Ethan Carter, a man most people would recognize from magazine covers and business headlines, strolled through the aisles in anonymity. He wore a faded hoodie, jeans, and a cap pulled low over his eyes, blending in with the ordinary crowd. He wasn't there for groceries. He was there for perspective. In the whirlwind of board meetings, luxury cars, and penthouse parties, he had begun to feel detached from real life. Tonight, he wanted to see what it was like again, to simply exist among everyday people. As he wandered toward the baby products aisle, his gaze landed on a young woman. She couldn't have been older than her late 20s, though the tired lines on her face made her look older. Her coat was thin, frayed at the sleeves, and she wore sneakers that had clearly seen better days. Her little boy sat quietly in the cart, holding a worn stuffed rabbit. He wasn't crying, but his wide eyes followed his mother's every move with innocent trust. Ethan slowed his steps, something inside urging him to observe. The woman reached for a can of baby formula, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted it from the shelf. She held it close, staring at the price tag as though it carried the weight of her world. Her lips moved in a whisper Ethan barely caught, "Rent or milk?" The words pierced the quiet aisle like a dagger. She turned the can around in her hands, reading the label as if maybe, just maybe, the price would change with enough wishing. Her son reached for it, tiny fingers brushing the edge of the can. She smiled weakly at him, her eyes glistening, and then slowly shook her head. "Not today, sweetheart," she murmured. The boy's face fell, but he said nothing, only hugging his stuffed rabbit closer. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had seen poverty before, but usually through tinted car windows or on reports his company sponsored for charity organizations. It was distant then, statistics on paper. This was raw, human, unfiltered. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman placed the formula back on the shelf. The motion was deliberate, almost painful, as though she were setting down not just a can but a piece of her dignity. She straightened her back, took a deep breath, and pushed her empty cart forward, her face a mask of quiet determination. Ethan stayed frozen behind a stack of cereal boxes, his hands gripping the cart handle tightly. Most people would have walked past her, maybe pitied her for a second before returning to their own lives. But something about the way she carried herself, the strength in her silence, struck him deeply. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't making a scene. She was simply enduring, sacrificing in silence for the sake of her child. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt powerless. But that feeling quickly turned into resolve. As she headed toward the exit, he left his own cart behind and followed her, curiosity and compassion pulling him forward into a night he didn't yet know would change them both. Outside, the cold night air wrapped around the young mother and her little boy like a cruel reminder of reality. The parking lot lamps buzzed weakly, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. She pulled her thin coat tighter, lifting her son out of the cart and balancing him on her hip with practiced strength. Her other hand clutched a worn coin purse, the kind that jingled sadly with too few coins inside. Ethan followed at a careful distance, not wanting to alarm her, but unable to turn away. The woman walked to the nearby bus stop, where a rusted metal bench stood beneath a flickering light. She sat down, shifting her son onto her lap, and began to count the coins in her purse. Ethan watched as her lips moved, whispering numbers under her breath, her fingers shuffling through quarters, dimes, and pennies. Her brow furrowed with frustration, and then came that look he recognized all too well, quiet shame. It wasn't just about money, it was about not being able to provide the basics for the person who depended on her most. Her little boy tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry," he whispered, his voice barely carrying in the stillness of the night. The woman's face softened immediately, though her eyes glistened with tears she tried to blink away. She kissed his forehead, forcing her voice into a gentle promise. "We'll eat soon, baby. Mommy promises." Ethan's chest tightened at the words. He had heard 1,000 promises in his life, from politicians, partners, and executives, but this one, spoken by a mother with nothing left but hope, was the most powerful of them all. Moments later, the bus rolled up with a hiss of brakes, headlights cutting through the darkness. The woman stood, holding her son in one arm while dropping the last of her coins into the fare box. It was all she had left, and she didn't hesitate. Her boy came first. Ethan could no longer stay back. He jogged forward, his breath clouding in the cold night air, and caught the driver just as the doors were closing. "Wait," he called, his voice firm but calm. The driver glanced at him impatiently, but Ethan ignored it. His attention was on the woman, who now held her son protectively, eyes wary as she looked at the stranger approaching. He raised his hand slightly, signaling he meant no harm. "Don't be scared," he said softly. "You left something behind." Her brows knit in confusion as Ethan pulled out a grocery bag he had quickly filled back at the register. Inside were 2 cans of baby formula, a small loaf of bread, some bananas, and a carton of milk. Nothing fancy, just the essentials. He held it out toward her. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. When she finally spoke, her voice shook. I can't accept this. We don't take charity." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "This isn't charity, it's just one parent helping another. I know what it's like to worry about someone depending on you." The boy peeked curiously from behind his mother's arm, his big eyes flicking from Ethan to the bag of food. For a long moment, the woman stood frozen between pride and desperation. Ethan waited patiently, his hand steady, his eyes kind. He wasn't a millionaire in that moment, just a man who couldn't walk away. The woman's hand trembled as she finally reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the grocery bag. It felt heavier than it should have, not because of the items inside, but because of what it represented. A stranger's kindness, something she hadn't expected. She pulled it close, hugging it to her chest as though it were a lifeline, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. She tried to say more but couldn't. All the words she had held back for weeks, every worry, every silent prayer, poured out in that one phrase. Ethan smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me," he said, slipping his hand into his pocket and pulling out a small white card. He tucked it discreetly into her coat pocket before she could protest. "Just take care of your little one. That's all that matters." The bus driver tapped impatiently, and Ethan stepped back onto the pavement. The mother pressed her son's head to her shoulder, still clutching the bag as if afraid it might vanish. As the bus pulled away, she looked through the fogged glass window. Their eyes met for a brief second, her gaze filled with unspoken gratitude, his with a quiet promise. That night, after putting her boy to bed, she remembered the card. Pulling it from her pocket, she turned it over in the dim light of her small apartment. Her breath caught. Printed neatly on it was a name she recognized from newspaper headlines and billboards, Ethan Carter. Below it was the address of one of his companies. But what struck her most wasn't the printed letters, it was the handwritten note scrawled beneath, "Come see me. Everyone deserves a second chance." For hours she stared at it, torn between doubt and hope. Why would a millionaire care about someone like her? Was it real, or just pity disguised as opportunity? But the next morning, as she packed the formula into her son's bottle, she decided she had nothing left to lose. A few days later, she gathered her courage and walked into the glass skyscraper downtown. The lobby was sleek and intimidating, filled with polished marble and employees in expensive suits. She felt completely out of place in her second-hand coat and scuffed shoes, her son's small hand clinging to hers. Yet when she gave the receptionist the card, she was led upstairs without hesitation. Ethan was waiting in a spacious but warm office, no suit this time, just a man with kind eyes who stood as they entered. "I'm glad you came," he said simply. He didn't ask for explanations or pity-filled stories. Instead, he offered her something she hadn't had in years, a chance. A job with fair pay, childcare support, and training that could help her build a future. The woman's knees nearly gave out as relief washed over her. For the first time in so long, she saw not just survival ahead, but possibility. From that night in the supermarket aisle to this moment in Ethan's office, her life had turned. No headlines were written about it, no cameras recorded it, but for one struggling mother and her son, the kindness of a stranger had rewritten their story forever.